Hello, hello! Welcome back to the Quiz and Quill podcast. This is our first episode of the fall 2022 season. Or should we call it the first episode of the 22-23 season? I don't know. But I'm Jeremy Lawrence, and I'm the faculty advisor for QQ.
I'm Margot D'Agostino.
I'm Allison Steele.
And we are your co-managing editors for this school year.
On this episode of the podcast, we are proud to present some winners of our yearly Quiz and Quill Awards.
We awarded these awards last spring, but we enjoyed the pieces so much that we brought them back to the podcast so you could hear them out loud. Most of these award winners were selected by outside judges not affiliated with Quiz and Quill, and you'll hear more about that throughout the episode. So first up, we have the winner of our spring fiction contest, I Am Without a Generation by Adam Willis. This piece was judged by Ann Strother, a Chicago-based fiction writer, a former marketing coordinator at Northwestern Press, and the current promotions manager at the University of Chicago Press. Ann had this to say about the story. It is a portrait of an anxious and isolated young adult, rendered with exacting detail. The protagonist, on the cusp of adulthood, is wary of a world in which intention can't determine an action's consequences, but inaction can't bestow purpose on one's life. Here's I Am Without a Generation by Adam Willis, read to you by the author. After the reading, you'll hear Adam speak with our current playwriting editor, Harper Wood.
When I stepped out of the shower this morning, my body shivered. This happened because I had been standing under hot water for nearly 2 hours. I read somewhere that long hot showers are effective at opening your pores, which makes your skin healthier in the long run. The skin of my fingers was wrinkled like elderly hands, and my whole body shook when the air outside the hot waterfall hit me like a wall of ice. I take Advil cold and sinus all the time, even when I'm not sick. I read in a magazine that viruses and germs target healthier people because they're better at spreading disease. Sicker people die faster, so germs don't like to infect them. I'm so scared of catching the coronavirus. I don't want to be put in an iron lung and have to watch soap operas and not be able to change the channel and miss out on my final exams next week, so I take Advil cold and sinus. I take too much of it and too often. It makes my heart pulsate and my breath weak, and I know it's harmful to my intestinal health and that it causes stomach ulcers and internal bleeding, but I'm so scared of watching soap operas and my professors hating me, so I take it anyways. I listened to this one song today by the band America. It's called A Horse with No Name. I read in one of the magazines that the band America was actually founded in England, which is kind of funny. The song originally made me happy because it reminds me of when I used to live out in the desert, out in Arizona. We used to visit my grandmother in Flagstaff every summer. Those Arizona memories made me smile. But the song also depresses me because I have this reoccurring nightmare now where I'm in a barn with these horses and they're all slowly dying. They had their face skin peeled off by a man in a dark suit with a red hat and a smile like death, and now their faces are just skulls. They aren't only without a name, but without an identity. My grandmother died 6 years ago, and the whole thing shook me so thoroughly that my father thought it'd be best to pick up our house in Sedona and move to Ohio, closer to our living relatives. Now Arizona memories remind me of horses with their face skin ripped off. What I eat is limited. I only consume 4 different things: dark chocolate, Diet Coke, Arizona iced tea, and Advil cold and sinus. These 4 things compose my diet because I read in a magazine that limiting how much you eat is healthy, and that it can help fight things like heart disease and obesity. I also read in one of the hospital magazines that a healthy diet can help fight the coronavirus, which I'm terrified of, because I don't want to watch soap operas and miss my final exams and have a grilled cheese served to me by an elderly nurse who doesn't know what to say when she comes to my room. And I don't want her to feel sorry for me and for my family, who just want me to be like my young, happy self again. And I don't want them to be sorry because I took all those pills, because I feel so empty inside, because I am without a purpose, because I am without a generation.
So, regarding the name of the piece, what does being without a generation mean to you?
So when I wrote this short story, I kind of had an idea in mind where I wanted to give my generation, Generation Z, kind of its perspective or like a voice, you know? So you have a lot of the people in the older generation who will complain about the youth and say that we're not motivated or that we're irresponsible. To be without a generation, I think, is to be without kind of a destination or a goal. And that's kind of where the idea comes from, of this person who's struggling, the persona who's struggling so much and doesn't have an outlet for themselves or support, and they're without a goal or in that way, yeah.
The spiral of paranoia surrounding getting sick in your piece is very reminiscent to someone who deals with things like hypochondria. Is that something that you feel like you've dealt with in your life, that sort of anxiety around health, particularly with the coronavirus the last few years?
So I use the coronavirus. I wouldn't say that I was necessarily hypochondriac in that sense, but I knew that there was an extreme anxiety around the change of scenery when I was junior at the time. I was, getting into like college classes, trying to start college beforehand, and I had a lot on my plate. And then to have all of that derailed by this virus and having people tell me I need to stay home and dictating my life like that, it's not more so the anxiety of getting ill, but having to complete tasks that you're assigned while something like that's going on. There's so many people that I know, myself included, who will put their own health to the side just to turn in an assignment or to finish a reading on time. And it's such a, almost a pandemic in its way with the youth, like saying like, oh, I eat terribly or my sleep schedule's awful. And they say this to each other like it's their only way of expressing that they're having trouble or that they're struggling. So the focus in the text isn't necessarily on that I'm going to get sick, that I'm scared of getting sick, but this is going to affect my ability to perform, to do what I'm told.
When you get to the portion about the diet, you have these 4 items that compose this persona's diet. What made you choose those 4 items? Was there a significance to them for you?
I like eating them and drinking them. Diet Coke, I'm like addicted to it. I need that stuff to function. Without it, I just get headaches and stuff. Dark chocolate, I think that goes really well with Diet Coke. The Arizona iced tea was more specific to the metaphor of Arizona being this place of the desert, and it's so different to Ohio where the persona ends up going. And then Advil cold and sinus, of course, was what the persona was taking that caused him to go to the hospital. So that's why I picked all 4 of those.
The piece seems to wind up ending back where it begins. Can you speak to the cyclical nature of writing this piece, and was that something you were intentional about while creating this?
Absolutely. So, as I kind of talked about before, there's a lot of people in my generation who not only will put their health and their well-being aside to, perform or to turn in assignments and things like that, but there's also kind of a disconnect between the older generations and the younger generations when it comes to expressing their kind of struggles and how they feel. What the persona is trying to do in this piece is basically tell you, I'm struggling, I'm not doing well, I need help right now, I'm going to die soon, right? So the reason it's cyclical like that is because they lack the ability to come to kind of a conclusion. They lack the ability to come to a catharsis. It's just them having to repeat the same things and say the same things in an effort to try to get some point across that I'm struggling. And the result, of course, is just a reiteration.
Next up, we have our spring essay winner, 10 Things I Would Tell My Inner Child. The essay contest was judged by Jossie Hall, an essayist, poet, and Otterbein alum, finishing their studies in nonfiction at the University of Iowa. Jossie spoke of the piece, "Essays are all about the relationship between reader, writer, and persona, about perspective. 10 Things manages to convey the realities of a unique perspective using a staple of essay and poetic formatting, and does it uniquely. It takes the form of the list and, by injecting it with specificity, nuance, and variety, manages to make the old new. You learn a lot about the author in just a little over 2 pages, and it's the kind of thing I read once more and then again a third time, catching new details and emotional ideas each time I revisit it." So here we have our essay editor Ashley reading Aleema Garfinkel's 10 Things I Would Tell My Inner Child, followed by a brief author's statement.
"10 Things I Would Tell My Inner Child" by Aleema Garfinkel, navigating the world as a HSP child of an immigrant. Number 1. Your crocodile tears are beautiful, reasonable, accurate reactions to your world. There is nothing wrong with you when you feel things deeper than others. The world being able to touch your soul gives you the capacity to facilitate so much healing. You do not need to suck it up, buttercup. You will grow up being able to be intuitive and empathize with so many others. Number 2. You shouldn't have to fake stomach aches to feel loved. You are worthy of affirmation in your existence. You shouldn't have had to call mama crying of physical pain as a front for the emotional pain you felt at 9 years old. You shouldn't have learned to fake sickness to receive the love you yearned for from her. Number 3. There is nothing shameful about showing your skin. You shouldn't have spent your 19th birthday crying in the back of your roommate's car alone all night because you were too distressed over your mom finding out your outfit revealed your shoulders to join the party. You shouldn't have ended up crying at homecoming in response to being stared at for wearing tights under your dress. You shouldn't have had to spend pool parties ashamed and self-conscious because mama got mad at you for packing a bathing suit that revealed your skin at 10 years old. You were too young to realize and internalize that you were no more than an object to be sexualized, and that the only avoidance of that was taking away your freedom of dress. I know how much it hurt for you to have a different standard of modesty set at home than the one set in the society you grew up in. It was additionally wrong for you to be taught so young the shame accompanied by having hair, both for being a woman and for being brown, because the white girls didn't have hairy legs. Number 4. I'm sorry you were scared to use the restroom in kindergarten. I'm sorry the upper graders would pinch your cheeks and squeal, "Look how cute," when they saw you. You should never be afraid of having your boundaries violated. Despite being as small and cute as you were, it was inappropriate for so many to feel it appropriate to touch you or speak down to you as a response. I'm sorry that this behavior from others carried on into your young adulthood. I'm sorry that the pinched cheeks would only be the beginning of many events in which your boundaries were violated. Number 5. You shouldn't have had to learn to dissociate at such a young age to bear the yelling or have to check in the mirror to make sure she hadn't left visible marks. No matter how young you were or what you did, you never deserved to be yelled at or hit. You never deserved to learn to quiet your panic attacks for fear of getting in more trouble. You are always deserving of being treated respectfully, being spoken to calmly, being given trust to have independence, and never being physically or emotionally abused. Don't let this upbringing allow you to believe you are any less worthy of these things. Number 6. You are not Moda. Rather, you are and always have been underweight. I'm sorry you were ever told otherwise. Being short does not mean you are less in need of sufficient nutrition. Exercising less does not mean you are less in need of sufficient nutrition. Your belt fitting at one hole larger than it did last week does not mean you are less in need of sufficient nutrition. Being too anxious to eat does not mean you are less in need of sufficient nutrition. Not being able to see your ribs or hip bones does not mean you are less in need of sufficient nutrition. Eating too much yesterday or planning to go out later today does not mean you are less in need of sufficient nutrition now. Number 7. You are not a sinner for liking her. You don't need to spend the next 7 years crying, praying to God to change you or relieve you of this trial. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. You will spend years scared to go to Pride or have queer friends in fear of holding hope of that for yourself. You will try so hard to convince others that you are attracted to men, terrified of what your reality would hold if that wasn't true. But Liam, there is nothing wrong with you. You are naturally so full of love. Why hate yourself so much over who you love? You will kill yourself believing that your parents will hate you, when really you will kill them by hating yourself. I can't tell you if they will ever accept this part of you, or if you will ever even tell them, but I can tell you that they love you and want you alive, however you are. Number 8. No amount of A's will be worth the insane pressure you put on yourself. I know that you learned to seek validation through academic achievement, so that was the only time you would receive it. But one day, Mama's voice punishing you for anything below perfection will become your voice, and it will drive you into the ground. Throw that voice away while you can, because Liam, you are so much more than a high honor roll, SAT score, or college acceptance. You will find yourself happiest attending your safety school and the one with the highest acceptance rate on your list. You will learn to cater your education to what you are passionate about rather than what will receive mashallah betas from aunties. You will always have an amazing work ethic. Allowing yourself downtime won't take away from your accomplishment. Number 9. Take up space. It is okay for you to feel angry or resentful when you have been wronged. You will waste years over the idea that you are meant to remain small, passive, and agreeable at the cost of your own autonomy. You don't need to stay insecure and approval-seeking. You have a right to your own independent thought. Seize the space you deserve and get angry about what moves you. Number 10. The world is not designed for you. That doesn't mean you are any less worthy of taking up space in it. But every aspect of who you are, queer, female, Muslim, biracial, HSP, petite, daughter of an immigrant, will be frowned at. Don't use this as reason to morph yourself into trying to be like everyone else. Oh, Liam, the sooner you see how special and beautiful these things make you, the sooner you will learn to find ways to navigate the world in a way that suits you. Let yourself take a break when you feel overstimulated, even if someone else doesn't need one. Allow yourself to develop pride in aspects of your identity that the world disapproves of, because in a world where you will have very few allies, you need yourself as one. You won't believe me yet, but you are not inherently flawed. Rather, you are valid and worthy of love, just as you are. The world is not complete without you in it, Liam. Aleema couldn't be here for an interview, so we have an artist's statement from her. I wrote 10 things I would tell my inner child at a time where I was starting to do a lot of therapeutic work around my complex trauma rooted in my childhood. I did a lot of reflections surrounding what my parents were wrong about and all the things I needed as a child that I never got. I started learning how my sensitivity and how being the child of an immigrant shaped my perception of the world and deepened how much loss I felt. Thus, I decided to give the things I never got back to myself via writing this piece. I told myself all the things I wish I was told. To this day, I go back and read this piece when I need reminders of the things that I wish someone would have told me years ago. I am honored that this very personal piece has resonated with others. It is an homage to anyone, and especially my younger self, who are grieving the loss of compassion that they never got. As I wrote, you are valid and worthy of love, just as you are.
Next, we have an exclusive interview with Ian Peloza, the winner of our Quiz and Quill cover art contest. The winner of the contest is selected by Quiz and Quill staff.
So here's Ian, interviewed by Naya, one of Quiz and Quill's copy editors extraordinaire.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for inviting me out here.
Of course. Thank you for being here. So you are the artist of our magazine.
That is correct.
And so has this been the first time you've ever, illustrated for a magazine?
For a magazine, yes. I've done some things for my school in the past, either for like a little newsletter that they would send out to all the students, but this is my first magazine.
Cool. And what's the specialty that you do, the kind of drawing?
Yeah. I do, my medium for it is scratchboard. So you know those little black little squares that you would get during Valentine's Day? And you would scratch underneath them and have like a rainbow underneath them. You could draw a little whatever you want stuff on them. Go crazy, you know. I get larger sheets of those, just kind of like regular paper sized, and I just scratch away at it pretty much. And I do really detailed kind of like animal drawings. Animals are my specialty because I love drawing fur. I guess claws, eyes are my favorite. I love drawing every little detail of the eyes, from like the moisture and like the light kind of reflecting off of it. I started that when I was in high school, my junior year. I made that the focus of my kind of portfolio work for just my college class then.
How long does it take? Because I've seen the pictures and all that detail looks like it takes hours, if not days, to work on them.
I do a lot of planning beforehand. So I take about a day to decide the animal I want, kind of just basically I do a rough sketch of it, where I'll see what I want the animal to be kind of positioned, if they're on a rock or if they're interacting with another animal. My kind of little specialty that I came up with, I draw out the parts that are going to be scratched on with pencil, and I take my iPad and I invert the colors afterwards, and that gives me an idea of how it will look on the actual scratch board itself. Just because you can't really use the pencil to make white on the paper or anything, so I use it to invert that, and I do that kind of all in one day, if not 2 days, to make sure that it's all secure. And then I usually take about a week. During the summer, I was able to work maybe 6 hours a day on it comfortably, because
Wow.
I really like doing art, so I would just sit there and just scratch away at it and everything, taking breaks of course and everything. For me, it's kind of it's really relaxing to do it. So time slips by, I guess.
Are there any other mediums that you do, or is it just scratchboard?
I really like to do just regular sketching. I don't really like to color in a lot of my drawings, just because I'm often oh man, did I use the best color, or could I have used a better color? Scratchboard is my main focus to where I can comfortably finish it, but I like to do other stuff. I do digital artwork some. That one's okay to color because I'm I can easily fix that. And digital's great because you can fix your mistake, or you can add layers to it through Photoshop. I haven't done too much with painting, but I enjoy kind of doing watercolor. Ooh, I love charcoal. Just kind of the smearing it around and fooling around with that. So yeah, I like charcoal a lot too.
So where did you learn?
I have taken art ever since I was in, I think, 3rd grade, when I started really kind of watching cartoons as a kid, and I was oh, this is cool. I want to animate these characters in my own comics, or doing kind of their own thing. I liked drawing a lot of Dragon Ball Z characters, kind of that anime, big muscles and awesome, fiery, flaming hair. And when high school came around, I was seriously considering doing art, because it was I can see myself doing this for hours and just really studying it. And then when I decided to take my college level class in my junior year, I was oh wow, I don't want to do this for a living. I cannot ruin something that relieves me of stress and make it a stressor, I guess.
So what I hear you saying, that this is strictly a hobby with maybe the occasional
Commission and stuff.
So I guess that's it. So thank you again.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure coming out and talking.
Yep. And I really hope that you continue to contribute to Quiz and Quill.
I will. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Of course.
Awesome.
And finally, we have our spring poetry winner. Tonight, I thought about Cleveland again. The poetry contest was judged by Ileana Rocha, author of the poetry books Karankawa and The Many Deaths of Inocencio Rodriguez, and current faculty at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Ileana says of the poem, "Tonight I thought about Cleveland again" stands out as both elegy and love letter to the city of Cleveland. To love this city is to love its ghosts, the speaker admits, recognition that this place has a complicated past and present. The poem is a reconciliation of that tension between reverence and irreverence, and it is clear that Cleveland has been pivotal and monumental not only to the speaker's personal consciousness, but also socio-political. So many ironies in this place. Cold is not yet met with comforting warmth, but rather with LeBron James jerseys on fire. When trash floats by like a belly-up fish in Lake Erie, the speaker feigns a smile. I am drawn to the maturity of this poem, to the voice that rejects the idyllic in favor of the real, and even when the speaker has a brief moment of talking shit about Cleveland, they immediately retract. The sidewalks turn into family, and you remember the first time you felt held. We're proud to introduce Tonight I Thought About Cleveland Again, read by the poet Madison Newman, followed by an interview with the author by our co-managing editor, Allison.
Tonight, I thought about Cleveland again. And the haunted back room at the Museum of Art with the red wine walls lined with medieval paintings of pale and empty-eyed subjects staring out from their ancient wooden frames. To love this city is to love its ghosts, to smile when trash floats by like a belly-up fish in Lake Erie, to flounder across slushy sidewalks, trying not to stumble into the knee-deep snow specked with cinders colored gray-black like the ash tapped off the end of a cigarette. This place guides you by your shaking, mitten-wrapped hands, makes frosted blue lips the newest trend, and just when you're starting to feel like you'll never be warm again, it heats you with the fires fueled by hundreds of LeBron jerseys burning in the streets. To love this city is to pledge it your undying loyalty, to chastise its traitors, yet to constantly be looking for your own way out. But just when you think you found your way out, the sidewalks turn into family, and you remember the first time you felt held. The sunlight will catch the crystals in the chandelier hanging over the Playhouse district just right, and you'll watch it disco ball the pavement, or a song will play in your back pocket as you dance along the beach, all the way to the lighthouse and back, a sherbet sunset dripping down over the horizon, and you will realize this place feels like the way food tastes when you know someone loves you. To love this city is to want to scream how much you want to leave it from the top of the tallest skyscraper, only for the wind to whisk your voice away and the clouds to claim you didn't mean it.
This is Allison Steele, managing editor of Quiz and Quill, here with Madison Newman, our poetry editor and the author of the piece you just heard. How are you, Madison?
Hi, Allison. It's so great to be here today.
So tell me about the piece.
So this piece I wrote for the Spring magazine. I wrote it in January, and I had spent Christmas break in Cleveland with my family because that's where I grew up, and I actually almost didn't submit this piece to Quiz and Quill because I had a little bit of a trepidation with it, but then I kind of sucked it up and submitted it anyway 10 minutes before the deadline was going to run out, and then here we are. I ended up really loving it, and everybody that's heard it has really identified with it, which has been such a special thing for me.
Yeah, I was about to say, I remember reading this piece for discussion about the pieces going into the magazine, and I remember reading this piece and immediately knowing I had to give it a 4 out of 4. It was so incredible, and it just displayed this very interesting relationship you have with Cleveland.
I do. I say all the time that I have a very complicated relationship with my hometown, and just from growing up there, I mean, I feel like everybody does, because living there, you don't get the idealized version of it. You get the real version. And it's not to say that I had a horrible time growing up in Cleveland, because I obviously didn't. Like, there were some very happy times and some very cool experiences that I got to have. This poem really feels like it does a good job of balancing the beauty that I experienced growing up in Cleveland, but also the trials that I have.
So why did you choose poetry instead of like an essay or a short story about Cleveland?
Poetry is my favorite genre. It really is. And I feel like it's the genre that calls to me the most. And I think that this piece, especially since it was so personal to me, I needed to do a poem. The piece told me, quote unquote, that it needed to be a poem.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And you said you wrote this back in January.
Yes,
right?
I did.
So it's been 10 months or so now since you wrote this piece. How does it feel reading it now after so much distance from the initial point of writing it?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I still very much stand by this piece. I mean, even reading it recently, I think that I still agree with everything that I wrote. I still stand by the language that I used. I feel like it stands the test of time, which, as someone that hates going back and reading their old writing, I am very proud to say that about this piece.
All right. Well, Madison, thank you so much for sharing your piece with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fantastic.
How do we do an outro?
Hey everybody, thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Quiz and Quill podcast. We are so happy that you chose to listen, and thanks for supporting the creative voices of Otterbein. That's usually how we do it.
Support for this podcast comes from the English and Communications departments at Otterbein University. This episode was recorded by Jordan Hamzy and Amy Hisridge, with additional recording and editing by Jeremy Lawrence. For more Quiz and Quill content and to stay current on our events and submission opportunities, stay tuned to our Instagram and check out our website, quizandquill.com. That's QUIZANDQUILL.com. And be sure to check back on our YouTube page for new episodes of the Quiz and Quill podcast.